Good evening, 6:30 PM, November 10th, 2025. I call the Select Board regular business meeting to order. If you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the interest of the public, this meeting is being broadcast live on TCTV Cable Station 8 and on the YouTube web platform. A recording will be available on TCTV YouTube channel. Is anyone else recording this meeting tonight? At this time, would you please silence all your phones? And as a reminder, public participation will be limited to citizen input, a maximum of 3 minutes per person for the Select Board procedure policy for a total of 20 minutes, so as to be fair to all. This meeting is governed by the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law and Robert's Rules of Order. This meeting is for the board to conduct its business. If town employees and board members who need to be places in the morning, as well as residents watching from home who may lose interest in meetings going 4 hours or more. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes of October 27th, 2025 and November 3rd, 2025.
I'd like to make a motion for October 27, 2025 with an amendment. It has the deputy assessor's name listed twice. So to strike out one of them. When the meeting started, it didn't post that. And then on towards the last page where it says comments, it says the spelling of Houghton Park, which is spelled incorrectly. It's Hought. It's where I say that the park is opened during the select board comments.
Not Houghton.
Yeah, the only two I see. Maybe those are the only 1, 2, 3 I see.
You got a motion November 3rd?
Oh, yeah, and then on November 3rd, I'm fine with that. So as is, unless somebody found something else.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Anything else? Do we have anything else on the minutes? Hearing none on the motion, how would you vote, Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Basso?
Yes.
And I vote yes. There are no executive session minutes. Approve. I am still looking through and trying to review any executive session minutes that can possibly come before the board for consideration to be released to the public. At this time, citizen input. How many do we have? Go ahead. Come on up.
Nowell, Winchester Street. I appreciate the intent of the selectmen's meeting and the opportunity to have citizens input. But like if there's an article on the agenda, like I think I know what it's about, but how can I speak about it until I hear what it's about? I'm just a comment.
I thank you.
Okay.
Thank you again. Liz Toth, Gray Road. I've got a comment about an upcoming agenda item, where is it? F. And I'm the electronic signs, I'm guessing on the content. I have a few concerns about the fact that Ms. Graves has brought that forward. Because first of all, it has gone in front of Capitol and she is on Capitol and Capitol has not done any kind of report yet. And so I think it's very inappropriate for her to be bringing something forward like that. The next thing is I heard through the grapevine that she wanted to be having signage and for the expenses to come out of the select board budget. And we're trying, please don't give me a dirty look. You know, we're trying to watch every single penny, right? And that's what the entire town should be doing. And as such, it's we shouldn't be spending any money. We shouldn't be proposing spending any money unless it's absolutely necessary. So I really have to question whether or not Ms. Graves should stay on Capitol at this point, because she's on Capitol, she's on the select board. She still makes announcements concerning Parks and Rec. And she's supposed to have had a 6-month cooling off period from Parks and Rec, yet she's still making announcements for it. She's got a son on Parks and Rec. She's got a son on Capitol. Her husband is is the town moderator. And I just feel like it's a little too much. So, you know, and if she's looking to spend the 200,000 that was earmarked from what the state gave us, we're not qualified to do it. We haven't met the requirements. So I have no idea why signage is on there to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Steve Castle, Director of TCTV, speaking on behalf of TCTV and the cable department, also on electronic signage. Just to remind you, or if you don't already know, TCTV has a proposal in for digital signage in front of this building. It was approved last year by Economic Development as part of a $200,000 earmark for economic development, which I understand needs to be spent by the end of 2026. And I think it would be a wonderful thing for us to do. It would show our town to be professional and modern, to have a sign in front of our town hall that said, "Welcome to Templeton," and to show some town notices like town meeting Wednesday, November 12th, and also to be able to sell advertising to give TCTV some revenue and even bring revenue into the town eventually. It is earmarked as one, or marked as one of our biggest initiatives that we can get money from. So I would hope that you would consider that and keep considering that. And I speak now because I don't know if I'll be allowed to speak later. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Anyone else? Town administrator has been excused from this meeting from a previous commitment. There are no new employees, no new appointments. Next item is the tax classification hearing.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, to open, I would move to enter into a public hearing for tax classification under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none on the motion, how would you vote, Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Graves,
Yes.
Mr. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Vasso,
Yes.
and I vote yes. The hearing is opened at 6:40. Every.
Yeah.
Assessors?
Yeah, if the board would like.
Motion to open up the assessors meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay. Hello, Mr. Chairman. Hello, members of the board. So I'm Justice Graves. I'm Deputy Assessor, and with me this evening are our Assessors Sue O'Coin and George Barnes. We are here for the tax classification hearing that you just opened up. In your packets, I know electronically it starts on page 18, where we're going with that. The tax classification hearing, and I just want to go over why we're doing it tonight, because I know that there are 3 new board members. If the rest of the board members would indulge me on that, so that everybody is on the same page with that. The tax classification hearing is for the purpose of the Board of Assessors to present information to the Select Board so that you may decide what the percentage of the town's property tax levy should be borne by each major class of property. That's divided between the real classes of property of residential, open space, industrial, and commercial, and also personal property, which is the 5th classification of property. The steps in the classification hearing process, everything that has to do with the classification hearing has to go towards progress towards the tax rate recap. So, for example, the determination of how much we are budgeting for the levy. The budget is still in process with you guys having your upcoming fall town meeting. But every other step up to this point has been completed, such as dealing and communicating with the Department of Revenue on our assessed valuations and obtaining certification and new growth revenue numbers from the Department of Revenue as submitted. What's happening now on your sheet, if you're on page 19 in the online one, is we are at step 6, 7, and 8, which is going over the classification hearing, discussing what the shift options are, and then ultimately you as the selectman will decide whether we will go with a single or a split tax rate for fiscal year 2026. And then after the classification hearing, what happens is that the results of this meeting will be posted into Gateway with me and the town clerk, and then additional steps will be taken, and then the annual tax rate recap will eventually be submitted to the DOR for its approval, and then we will have an approved tax rate from the state. So that is where we are at in the process. Again, we're at steps 6, 7, and 8 on page 2 or online on page 19. So, going in order, what we're going to do is we're going to present what happened this year with the valuations so that you have an understanding of what's happening in the market in Templeton. What is the economic situation of Templeton? Is there anything that we're seeing out there that would be cause for alarm, or anything that is unusual with regards to, where are we with commercial and industrial, and, what's happening with residential in town? If you go to online page 20, it's the 3rd page, the tax impacts are really what is really a summary of what's going on. So this year, residential valuations increased by 3.49% in response to last year's sales. Sales from July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2025 were used. We either have to use 1 year of sales, or we have to go back and do a window of 2 years, depending on how many qualifying sales were in each category of property, just so that you're aware of that. Currently, with the sales of 2025, which will go into next year's, we do see residential values continue to rise. However, residential values are not increasing at the rate that they were for the past several years, where you're seeing, across the board increases of over 6% for every major category of property. You're not seeing increases in your commercial this year, because there was an increase in your commercial valuations last year. Last year, we had what was a revaluation of the town. Last year was a 5-year certification year for the town, where we go over that. So that is why you don't see any conversation about any increases with commercial this year. That's typical after a revaluation year. And after review, land values have stayed the same for fiscal year 2026. but they will again be evaluated next year as we are seeing some things with regards to our prime lots and backland values. But again, there's no changes with that. If there was a change in land valuation, that would affect everything across the board from residential down to industrial, because every piece of property has land on it, or it consists of a land valuation, not just building valuation. With regards to the residential valuations that increased this year, some notable increases to note. Ranches went up a little bit at about 1.8%. Your biggest increases were your Cape Cods and your colonials at about over 6% each. Your modern contemporaries, your condos, two families and apartments, they all increased around 3 to 2% across the board. Everything else, there were not enough sales, or the sales that were there did not justify doing any increases, and there were changes in those major classes of real estate last year. In some cases last year, we actually had to decrease some of the categories. So currently everything else is staying stable according to what the sales are telling us out in the market. But again, sales are still continuing to rise. There will be adjustments next year. Residential valuations continue to outpace your commercial. Industrial is really the baseline conversation that we're having here, and it doesn't seem like that situation will change anytime soon. With that, recommendations, we will go back to the recommendations at the end, but instead what I will do is we will go to page number 21, page 4. If you look at the breakdown on that page, especially in the center there at the top, the total value of properties in town currently sits at $1,199,579,301 for total value in the town. That makes up over 92% residential, and the 7.7% that remains is your combined CIP, or commercial, industrial, and personal property values. The average single-family home assessed value went up to $378,285 this year. This is a $12,179 valuation increase from last year's, and that increase, or that rate of increase, you'll see there's a different breakdown of this a little bit ways into your packet, is more similar to what you would have seen for increases going back to FY19 from FY18. So that's something that I'll be keeping in, that myself and the Board of Assessors will continue to watch as we go through next year's valuation cycle to see what the trend is. But that is just something that was interesting to note when looking back at least those past 10 years. Over the past 10 years, valuations for the single family home on average have increased over $204,000. You can look, and on that page 8, there is a breakdown year from year, so you can see how the increase actually changes from year to year. Are there any questions so far? No? Okay. If we go to tax rate history, which is on PDF page 22, page number 5 in your packet, the big question that everybody likes, and I had given it at the last quarterly report, is what does $1 raise on the tax rate this year? $1 raises on the tax rate this year $1,199,579, which is an increase from last year. You'll notice in the approved new growth column that new growth was certified at 105,586. This is over what your estimates were for the year, but are down from fiscal year 2025. This was not unexpected. Fiscal year 2025's new growth that was submitted and certified contained a lot of, I'll call it, one-offs that happened. There were a lot of things that we were finding out there during the revaluation that would not constitute new growth in a successive fiscal year, but did count for new growth last year that we were able to capture. There were also just a lot of unexpected changes that came up during that, that are consistent and were consistent with our valuations this year. But again, since that was already counted in new growth for last year, you wouldn't see that reflected. When new growth happens, it's only counted in the year that it actually is new to the tax base of the town. And when it is newly introduced construction to the town, it is not repeated in future years. It's, new house gets built in 2022, it goes on fiscal year 2022's new growth. It doesn't go into successive years. There has to be a physical new building or physical new personal property or infrastructure in order for it to continue. or in order for there to be something new added to it. The amount of building permits that have been coming out, I know that Lori Weeda's department has talked about this, are significant. There is a shift in the amount of new homes and in the amount of new construction going on. One of the biggest pieces of new construction that we'll have to watch for fiscal year 2027 is the Baldenville Elementary School. The new growth for the transference that happened, where the land and the remainder of the building over there originally was exempt, got transferred out from being exempt and is counted as new growth because it was not taxable. It was on the tax rolls, but it was considered $0 for tax value and is now considered new growth on the books. But the valuation for the land will not be in new growth next year, and we will have to see what the building value comes in for that project. But that is your major project for next year. In terms of other houses that we are waiting on, there are some that are approaching new occupancy. There are some other projects that are in the works. So we will have to wait and see what new growth does next year. But the difference that happened this year, I wanted to just repeat, was not unexpected. And part of the difference also within fiscal year 2025 from fiscal year 2026. Again, slowdown in major construction, and then a lot of our cyclical work that we were working on to finish that we got finished this year got work done back in fiscal year 2025 as well. And there was a lot of adjustments that needed to be made to property cards, and some of that resulted in new growth as well while we were out in the field. So just keep a note on that. That's something also to keep in mind that next year for FY 2027's new growth, cyclical, we're in a year where we're just going to go through and replan how we're going to look at the town for the next town years. There are not going to be cyclical visits next year. It's just going to be, drives around town, seeing what's up, going through building permits. So between having a revaluation year in 2025 and your cyclical being completed in 2026, it'll be interesting to see where new growth lands in terms of what construction we find and what construction actually gets built and recorded out there. So just so that you're aware of that. Are there any questions on that sheet? No? Okay. PDF page 23, page number 6, historic assessments and percentages of value. You can see that Templeton's percentage of residential value far outpaces the amount that has increased with its commercial, industrial, and personal property, or its CIP percentage. You can see going all the way back to fiscal year 2013, CIP as a percent of total value used to be at 11.64. We've been hovering at the high 7% end for the past at least 3 or 4 fiscal years. With that, in terms of parcel counts, your industrial parcels have not changed. You have lost a commercial parcel from year to year that got converted into one commercial property, got converted into a single family home. All others have remained the same. Personal property accounts did decrease by 10. That was expected with different types of personal property with respect to Peaceful Pines and other accounts of that similar sort, but your major accounts that are held in personal property have not changed. And your exempt parcels, you've lost a couple of those because they've now been added to the books and are back on the tax rolls. Other than that, those are the major changes that have happened with your assessment categories. If we go to PDF page 24, you'll see the top 10 taxpayers. A lot of them are what you would expect. The list hasn't really shifted too much over the years. A couple have moved around consistently. I don't know if there's any questions on that. Not seeing that. We can go to page 8 in the PDF or page 25 on the PDF. Again, referencing back to page 4, this is more of a detailed breakdown of the historic average single-family tax bill. Keep in mind that this does not include the 3% CPA surcharge, so you can sort of see what the trend line has been going for the past, since fiscal year 2013. We just add to it so that you have a historical basis by which you can pick whatever section or economic section and see what that trend line was. again, the fiscal year change from fiscal year 2019 to 2018 is the most similar to what just happened with our increases in valuation this year. So that is something that we'll be paying attention to and seeing what the trend line is next year. That going to PDF page number 26, something to include for this year, just because there was a new board, additional information just to see where we compare in terms of what our average valuations are and tax rates and average single family home tax bill is throughout Northern Worcester County. The ranks that you see there are based off of where the average tax bill ranks in Massachusetts as a whole from communities that have a certified tax rate for that fiscal year. All 351 communities did get their tax rate certified last year, so that's where we are at with that. And then one of the more interesting pages, page 27 in your PDF, but page 10 overall, are the historic comparisons for different classes of properties. Added to this year, just because condos have increased so much, is a condo end unit was added so that you could see how those valuations have increased with regards to other types of residential properties throughout the years. And because of the economic activity over at 1 North Main Street, we switched that out to reflect 163 Patriots Road on there so that you could see the changes in valuation for a little bit of a larger commercial property. In comparison, you still have 15 Central Street used there as a comparison as well. And again, we didn't increase or change any valuations with our commercial properties this year. And so you'll see that the increase in valuation for FY 2026, there was no increase with that, but there were increases going back to fiscal year 2025. So with that being said, before I go back to the recommendations from the Board of Assessors, does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns for myself or for the board?
Chair. I might. I just had a couple observations that, I think we've talked about in the past. But I think might deserve a different look of some kind. I know you said the, classifications, we just did the reval, and I went through in just a quick look, and I believe, since 2013, residential real estate has increased 230%.
Yeah, it's increased quite a bit.
Commercial real estate has increased 157%, and industrial has increased, I think, 136, if I'm not mistaken. My concern is, I did look at some of the properties, and I have over the last 5 years also. And I noticed that last year we had commercial properties go up roughly 30% in value, a lot of them. They went from, let's say, 400 and change to over 6. That seems to be a tax loss somehow for us, because it seems like that didn't happen overnight. And since we've been doing residential real estate on a yearly basis, basically as they come, it would seem that we might have missed the ball a little bit on some of the commercial, because, jumping up, let's say, from 420,000 to 630, there's tax increments, and had to have gone up in increments at least, over a couple of years. And it seems as though we're missing out on tax dollars.
So I can answer why that happened over the past. So the difference between why you don't see on an interim year, because this is an interim year for the town, it's not a certification year, you see increases. You can do an increase on your commercial, but you have to have a good faith market basis for doing it. It's much harder to do that with commercial and industrial properties because they don't sell as often. The most widely used and most easy to understand method for valuation is the sales comparison model. where, you know, you compare apples to apples. This similar property sells at this market rate. You know, you have 5 properties that are the same selling at this market rate, and now you're trying to value this very similar property over here. You would use those 5 comparable sales, make adjustments, and then you come to the appropriate value for what that other property is. Commercial property just doesn't sell as much, so we have to use what's called the income approach to valuation. It is a little bit more expensive and time consuming for the town to do the income approach to valuation and go through a commercial valuation. However, with the spread out, and this only happened recently, revaluations used to be every 3 years. So in terms of those gaps that you're seeing now, you wouldn't see that happen back on the 3-year cycle because you'd have 2 years where you would just be doing your interim adjustments. If you needed to make adjustments to commercial, you would start to see that, but you would always be changing your commercial within that 3rd year because you'd have to because of the certification years. Part of the plan with our Board of Assessors is that every 2 to 3 years in the middle of a cycle before we hit our 5th year, we will need to have contractors come in and we will have to start looking at those commercial values. So in a year or two, when we will probably have a very different conversation where we will be looking at commercial values before we hit a certification year, because increasing things by 30% is just not going to work. It's not fair to the taxpayer because ultimately the commercial and industrial properties, like you said, it doesn't just happen overnight. Their valuations were increasing over time, and it just wasn't something we were able to measure quite so easily. So that became apparent to us during this certification year cycle, and so that's the plan moving forward with our revaluation model, to every 2 to 3 years in the middle of our 5-year cycle to look at commercial and industrial, make proper adjustments, and then to, when we go into our certification year, see what the market tells us, see where the cap rates are, see where, you know, everybody's doing in terms of their businesses, and then see what type of valuation increases need to happen there so it's not so much of a difference. But you're right about that, and that's come up across the state with different assessing offices, especially smaller towns. You will have seen that within the last full change over to the 5-year cycle that a lot of towns have experienced that, and that's a big recommendation from the DOR that we should be looking at our commercial and industrial at least every 2 to 3 years in the middle of that. So that's something that will be addressed. I'm not sure if it'll be addressed next fiscal year, but by that 3rd fiscal year 2028, it will be done before we go to fiscal year 2030, that there will be a review of that. And whether there'll be increases in commercial or industrial or not, the market will tell us. So.
Appreciate the answer.
No problem.
And do you believe that that is why, at least I'm seeing, and this is fortune telling, so I mean, just, but what I've been seeing, doing some reading and so forth, is that more and more towns are considering a split tax rate rather than a single because of the lag in commercial real estate.
So it's a conversation on a town by town basis. At any conferences that I've been at, when you don't have a lot of commercial, industrial, or personal property value, you don't see the towns talk about doing the split tax rate, because any shift that you do would be subject to the volatility of a very, very small group of properties that if anything were to change with them, you're shifting that immediately back over to the residential tax base. You see it with much bigger communities, like the conversations that have been happening in Boston, where they had their whole issues last year with getting their tax rate certified, and the plans that the mayor had over there. Bigger cities, they have a lot more of a portfolio of accounts that make up that commercial and industrial. But if there's too much in one category and there's volatility in it, you see issues like what happened over in Boston, where you had a huge swing and a decrease. And even with shifting the tax rate, most of the burden was pushed back onto the taxpayers. The other thing to keep in mind is that Templeton's real estate portfolio, for that, a lot of your local businesses are owned by the residents that live here, and they're much smaller. And not only do they have commercial real estate that they're doing business on, but they have personal property accounts as well. So when you shift the tax rate over to a CIP, where you shift it over to your commercial, industrial, and personal property, you're not only going to be taking that out of your residential, but you're going to be pushing it onto that individual business's real estate account and onto their personal property account. So they have to deal with that twice. Just to keep that in mind for the conversation. But in terms of individual towns doing that, because it's such a small, with such small numbers, with the small percentages that we have, we would not be able to shift as a lot of percentage off, because the law says that you can only go up to 150% of what your CIP value is. And even then you cannot perfectly do that because we're dealing with numbers that are in the millions and billions, and we need it all to fit into a tax rate of 4 digits. Tens place, dollars place, and then you have 2 cents. So at the end of the day, if you were to, you would never be able to shift it up perfectly to that in the first place. And the amount of money, because of how much value is in your real estate right now for residential, it's a conversation to have. I know looking at it last year, I had done an exercise with the Board of Assessors, and it may have shifted preliminarily about 10 cents on the tax rate, which that would have only been about $40 on the average single family tax home, on the average single family tax bill. How that would have affected commercial and industrial and personal property, that was never something that was looked at much further than that. But the shift that you would have on your tax base for doing that, you would find that their tax rates would be, well, your tax rate for your commercial, industrial, and personal property would have to go way up because it's such a smaller amount. It would look significantly bigger than your single family home tax rate or your residential tax rate, because again, the percentages of value are just so different in Templeton. You know, it's 92% to 7.7%. So it's just, I don't know if that's helping with the discussion or answering your question on that a little bit.
It is, and it brought forward one other point that I wanted to bring up, which was that seemingly in Massachusetts, the average commercial value per property, per town is around 15%. And we sit around 7, like you said.
Right.
So that makes that shift, you know, somewhat doubly impactful for
Yes.
the commercial real estate.
Right, because for every percentage that you're shifting, I mean, if we had an even Gardner, and I don't know, because we're not the city of Gardner, they don't know I'd call it their demographics of their values, but I don't know their LA4 off the top of my head, but they have significantly more commercial and industrial than we do, in terms of pure parcel count. I don't know where their percentages fall, but right. And if Gardner's not, you know, not that Gardner is necessarily the flag bearer for it, but if communities that surround us at that level are not making the shift towards a split tax rate, and we're sitting, you know, twice as low as them in terms of our commercial, industrial, and personal property portfolio, like I said, it's a conversation to have. It's in the jurisdiction of the select board to decide that, but ultimately the benefit that you would be seeing for your residential may not be as much as you would hope or expect.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Thank you much.
The city of Gardner, their percentage they get from residential is around 87-88%, and that gives them about 12% from commercial, industrial, personal property stuff. So they're, with the amount of business you look in Gardner, you would think it would be much higher, but they're relatively close to Templeton as far as the percentage. And I know, like, I looked it up when I was saw the classification, but we're really kind of close. If you look at all the business, you know, you'd think it would be
Right.
a bigger margin, but it's really not.
And a big part of that is, again, the residential has just been outpacing commercial right now. And with the shockwaves that happened after COVID with the commercial market, everything has just, you know, that's where we sit right now. But you can see it over the years that, again, our residential, you know, with new subdivisions, with new parcel cuts that are happening, you're adding more residential inventory. and you're not adding to your commercial and industrial portfolio. In fact, you've lost properties over the past several years that have now gone on to the tax rolls as single-family homes. So that's what your situation currently is in Templeton.
Yeah, and we're building more and more residential facilities and not as many commercial, so it's just gonna go further. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes, sir.
Justice, I see on our page 8, PDF 25, and
Yep.
our page 10, PDF 27, you've got a little note and a flag here. Single family tax bill does not include the 3% CPA surcharge.
Yeah.
If we did include it, what would these numbers change to? And why aren't we reporting that? Because that would be accuracy and transparency.
So, historically, we have not had it on there. To add the CPA valuation, I would have to go through and manually on all of the reports when we submit everything to the DOR and is standard in our computing software. Everything is based off of the single family average. And it's not based off of any additional taxes that the town votes for, that the town chooses as a local option, because Community Preservation Act is a local decision. It is something that I could pull up in the future if the selectmen were interested. But in terms of comparing the average single tax, if you go on the DOR's website and you start comparing, the average single family home tax bill, you're not going to see any numbers included in that with CPA. Whether a community is a CPA community or not, you're just comparing bare bones to bare bones on what the average single family home tax bill is according to, what their residential or, their CIP tax rates are, or what their tax rate is for residential for that year. So just to compare apples to apples, that's the reason why we haven't added it in. Because again, if you look at all the state literature and if you start playing with the wealth of information that's on DOR's website, you're never going to see any numbers for the percent of CPA surcharge on there. Again, that's something that we could include. What is the additional amount that is typically assessed on a single family home, whether that gets included in the total tax bill amount or whether it's just another column to say, add these two columns together and you get the true, you get what happens typically in Templeton. Because again, if you start pulling those average single family tax bill numbers and I were to include the 3% CPA surcharge in there, it's not going to look anything that DOR is reporting out, and it's not going to look similar at all to what's going on within the Commonwealth, because you won't see that.
I can appreciate that, but looking at 1.2 billion, using a nice round number, 3% is a pretty significant change to that on our page 4, the total property values. So if we were to see that surcharge not reflected, is how I'm reading this,
Mhm.
the 1.199579301, I'd just be curious to see what that number truly comes out to, adding the surcharge in.
And adding the surcharge in won't add to the valuation. It would just add to the tax bill amounts.
Okay.
And then you have to keep in mind that Templeton has adopted in every single city and town, when they adopted CPA or when they make changes to CPA, some of them have the $100,000 exemption on real estate like Templeton does. Some of them don't. So even if you were to compare between Community Preservation Act communities or CPA communities, that you'd have to know all of the nuances between them in order to equalize it out and say apples to apples, what are we looking at?
Understood.
And again, the single family average tax bill without, including CPA within that discussion does that. Once you include CPA in that discussion, it's a little bit different. But in the future, that's something that we can take back and we can add as an extra column of, so here's where the single family tax bill is. And then here's what they're additionally doing in, approximately based on CPA surcharge.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. Is there any other questions from the board? Okay.
Anything else from any of the board?
So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to report what the recommendations from the Board of Assessors are for this year. The Board of Assessors recommends that the Select Board adopt a residential shift factor. In order to have a single tax rate for this year, that shift factor would be a value of 1.0000 with a corresponding CIP factor of 1.0000, thereby maintaining the relative shares of overall tax burden borne by each residential property owner as in past years. Again, making that, the recommendation this year is again to maintain a single family or to maintain a single tax rate this year, excuse me. And you can see draft motion below that on page 20 in the PDF or page 3 in your packet that you may use when voting tonight. And if you need anything else when drafting that motion, we're here to help you with that as well. So just wanted to report that is the recommendation of the Board of Assessors.
Thank you. Anything else from the assessors? Anyone else? At this time, I would make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, how would you vote, Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Basso?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And the hearing is closed at 7:16. On the tax classification motion, I move to vote in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, as amended, the percentage of local tax levy which will be borne by each class of real and personal property relative to setting the fiscal year 2026 tax rates and set the residential factor at 1.0000 with a corresponding CIP shift of 1.0000 pending certification of the town's annual tax recap by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue.
Second.
Any question, discussion on the motion? Hearing none. On the motion, how would you vote, Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Basso?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you to the Board of Assessors.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Graves.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Chairman, if the Board of Assessors would like to adjourn their meeting.
Adjourned.
Second.
All in favor?
All right,
Thank you, everyone.
and adjourn. All right, thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
The next item is an earmark money for the senior needs. There was a letter in the packet. And Mr. Nowell Francis, Chair of the Advisory Committee. Will you please come up, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the Select Board for placing this earmarks recommendation on your agenda this evening. I would like to make a brief statement about this recommendation. First, I'd like to make it very clear that at the time advisory met in September and considered this request, the town was in between town administrators. If Mr. Ryan was on board at the time, advisory would probably have proceeded differently and involved the town administrator. Secondly, I also want to make it clear that while I hope you act favorably on this recommendation, that you, as members of the Select Board, can accept, reject, or modify this recommendation as you see fit. If the Select Board needs assistance modifying or redrafting this request, the advisory committee, we will assist you. I feel that advisory should try to support the Select Board in any way that we can. However, I am very satisfied with the letter that is in your packet, which was prepared by advisory and Jackie Prime, and I urge you to adopt it as written. I also, thirdly, I would like to make it clear that the Select Board should create earmark requests for every town department and not just senior services, and include the earmark requests as part of the legislative requests that you are now making annually to State Representative Jonathan Zlotnick and State Senator Peter Durant. Finally, Jackie and myself, we are under no illusions that this earmark request will be granted by the state legislature. It's basically a legislative Hail Mary pass attempt, but I feel very strongly that if you don't ask and ask over and over again, you will never get. So you might as well ask. I now would like to discuss this particular earmark request and the issue of earmarks in general in order to assist you as Select Board members. In late August, earlier this year, I met with Jackie Prime. She is your very capable Senior Services Department head. And every 12 to 15 months since I was appointed to advisory in 2022, I have met with the department heads of several, but not all of the town departments. And I do that, as I said, every 12 to 15 months. When I met with Jackie in August, we discussed her budget. And at that time, I suggested that she should prepare an earmark request for the advisory committee to consider. Ms. Prime did so, and her written request was placed on the advisory committee agenda for our September 18th, 2025 meeting. And at that meeting, her request received a favorable recommendation from advisory. Now, in your original packet, it did not have the letter that Jackie wrote to advisory, and so that's why I included it. It has an estimate for the shelter items that she requested. So I'm adding that to enhance what's already in your packet. Specifically, Jackie requested that an earmark request be made for 175 hours of staff funding at $19 per hour for a total of $3,325. And additionally, $37,600 for vehicle shelters for a total request of $40,925. After our vote, April Cover of advisory and Jackie drafted a possible letter to Representative Zlotnick, which is what was initially placed in your packet for tonight's meeting. I now would like to talk briefly about legislative earmarks in general. Every year, the legislature grants earmark requests in various amounts. In fiscal year 2023, there were 1,350 earmarks enacted that amounted to $225 million for local projects out of a $54.8 billion budget. The following year, fiscal year 2024, there were 1,350 earmarks totaling $81 million for local projects out of a $56.2 billion budget. For fiscal year 2025, there were 493 earmarks totaling $29 million out of a $61.01 billion budget. And for the present fiscal year that we are in today, there were 788 earmarks totaling $74.7 million within the $61.1 billion budget. And the source for most of the earmark numbers that I use is the Massachusetts taxpayers' Foundation and also the mass.gov website. If you had to make an average, the high number of earmarks requested is probably in the $1,000 to $1,200 range, and the low number is probably in the $300 to $400 range for earmarks. The governor, if an earmark is passed by the legislature, the governor can still make what are called 9C cuts. It's usually quite often the first target if the governor wishes to make cuts. And I believe for the fiscal year 2024 budget, the governor really hacked away at those requests. And so the dollar amount for earmarks is far less than the year prior to that. And in my discussions with Jackie is I felt that if her department and if the town in general was to try to make a request of between $30,000 and $100,000, good chance of something being granted. Your representative, Jonathan Zlotnick, he probably has the ability to request earmarks in the $2 to $3 million range for Gardner and Ashburnham and Winchinen and Templeton. That's his district. So he could probably make $2 to $3 million in requests each year, and who knows what amount would be granted. But the beauty of them is that it's really outside of the formula type requests, like Chapter 90 is a formula, Chapter 70 for school aid is a formula, and your unlimited local government aid is a formula. They're all formulas. So the earmarks kind of cover that ground where it's a request that might not fit into a formula, but it's a worthy thing to ask for. With Jackie's request, I'm not sure if the request for the vehicle shelters is on this year's capital. It is, okay. It is the third or fourth year, at least, that she's made. What?
I think it's the third, yeah.
Okay. So third year she's made the request, and unfortunately, it just can't get high enough on the priority list, or there's not enough free cash to grant the request, but she feels that it's needed. It's part of it's part of the Council on Aging transportation vehicles, and there's elderly drivers, and rather than shovel the snow off the vehicles, the shelters would help these elderly drivers. But there are other areas of the town budgets. If you made one request for an earmark per department each year, I can think of an example being that Chief Dickey in the fire department. He's made numerous requests over the years for $115,000 or $120,000 for a study for a public safety type building. It's been kicked around for years. The fire department buildings are older. Another need the fire department has is for a new ladder truck, which would be over $1 million. Maybe an earmark could fund part of that, conditioned on it being, the rest of it being funded at town meeting. It's just, those items that they just don't fit within the mold of what we do, or the constraints of what we have, every year, but it's something that's needed. And there's also, the DPW, Bob Sosek, for the past 3 years, he's been talking about the need for one more, plow truck, to complete the rehab of his fleet. But even with the ARPA money that we had, where, there were some plow trucks purchased, it just always seems to fall short of that one additional plow truck. So if you can go department by department and they have a need, which they repeat, 3 or 4 or more times, and we just don't seem to have, with the constraints of our existing budget and our processes, the money to have that. But there are items that are, really necessities. There really are necessities. So that is the reason for the request. I hope that you would act favorably on this particular request. If you do act favorably on it, budget season is coming up, and a good time of the year for Representative Zlotnick to have this request in hand would be January or February of this coming year. And it would also give you as a select board time to make additional requests. I know advisory, for the past couple of years, we've come up with legislative requests in the beginning of the year, sometime between January and May. We're going to do it again this year at the beginning of the year. And I just think if we have both earmark requests for perhaps the priority items for the legislative requests, in addition to the legislative requests, and hope that at least one or two of them may be granted. And as I said, if the town does not ask every year, I don't think we've been asking on a consistent, systematic basis. And I just want to repeat the point, if we don't ask every year, the town will not get, so we should at least ask, if nothing else. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I expressed to Capital last week, the situation with the vehicles. It's pretty crazy what these drivers have to do to get those vehicles ready to go on the road after snowstorms. Town Administrator Ryan, began a conversation last week with the light and water director about the carport, funding of the carport specifically, so we're kind of just trying every avenue we can to get this done.
Not only for the drivers who are older side and to get on top of the kind of high buses, it's to meet the legal requirement of
Right.
no snow on them going down the road. Because if anything doesn't get taken off and it hits a car, well then you're just asking for trouble.
Right.
So I have a question. Concerning the letter, which I'm in favor of doing. According to our Shine volunteer, I'm not quite a senior yet. I think she said I'm a sophomore or something, but I support the seniors. And if you have this in a Word document, if you could send it so we could put signature lines for the board to sign. But I think the letter covers what the board would support, and I don't see the need to reinvent the wheel and write a different letter. That's my thing on this board. If you have that in the Word, if
We'll make it available to the select board.
send it to the town administrator, if we could,
Yeah.
so we could make the signatures, and then if the board votes, so we could sign it and submit it to Representative Zlotnick.
And also, I want to make it clear is, we will go through this process for each of the other town departments, because I know, I've looked at these budgets long enough. I know there's one or two items, I mentioned them already, but there's, each department has one or two items, which is kind of the bridge too far for our present budget constraints, and it should be the subject of an earmark. I mentioned the fire department request for the plans for the public safety fire building. It just seems like every department has has needs, and we would be glad to assist the select board to prepare.
Anyone else on board? Have anything?
Through the chair, just a quick comment. This year is kind of a challenge for capital. My hat goes off to the team that's working on that. We were up against an interesting scenario where a lot of the capital items were just zero funded and stricken from last year's budget. We knew we were in tough times for this fiscal year. We're facing tough times right now because free cash is yet to be certified. So we don't even know what capital's operating budget is at the moment. Capital's still diligently working through. They're still racking and stacking and trying to come up with a recommendation to make a report, but we just don't know where everything's going to land. And that creates its own set of unique challenges. In a perfect world, we could wave our magic wand, say, "Oh, money's here, let's make it happen." But
Well, we also don't have the ARPA money as well.
True.
When I sat with you on the capital improvements committee, it was at the tail end of ARPA, and that
Yep.
really made a huge difference. But I would point out is I look at this as a starting point for a conversation with Representative Zlotnick. And the timing is, maybe we should wait until after the certification of free cash when you have a better picture of what, the capital needs may be. I offer that as a suggestion.
I tend to agree with Chairman Bennett. I don't have any problem putting my name on this letter. It's, if we don't ask, that's the surefire way to not get anything.
That's exactly
But
how
I
feel.
don't agree with waiting. Let's get the request in.
And where are we gonna land in the whole big scheme? I don't know. The governor's already signaled she plans on requesting more 9C cutbacks and pullbacks, so Lord knows what's coming at us next.
But I would like to ask the board to vote to accept the letter and endorse it for the board to sign and send it like yesterday. The free cash thing, whenever it gets done, we'll just have that. But are you asking for an earmark? I mean, let's ask away.
And I think it's a reasonable request.
I mean,
We do,
they can say yes or they can say no,
right,
but they're not gonna say yes if we don't ask them.
right.
And it's something I think, like I said, as in this neck of the woods, it's needed, because when the snow falls, the stuff has to be cleaned off, and if you have someplace to park it, then it takes care of that issue. It's not like you're building a building and all of this, but it's just. So,
Chair,
any further?
Mr. Chair, if I might. One question I do have. Looking at the letter that Jackie sent, and this letter here, it seems as though this earmark also has the intent of funding people, which I believe is a one-time fund, one-time money.
That's one of the problems of an earmark, is that if you ask for a position to be funded, it's a one-off, and the town would have to find the money, you know, to keep that employee in the future. I would emphasize again is, I think the most important thing we can do is get this into the hands of Representative Zlotnick. And then, you know, hopefully either the town administrator or, you know, somebody from the select board or some combination of people can, you know, can talk with him about, you know, he's been in the legislature long enough that he can tell us what will fly and what will not fly. And I really think, as I said, I think, you know, one of the purposes of this is to start a conversation. And it may very well be that, you know, the request for people will end up on the cutting room floor, so to speak. But again, I go back, if you don't ask, you're not gonna get, and we should at least ask and find out what we have a reasonable chance of securing.
Well, there's my one issue with this whole thing, because I fully believe in the carport and all that. I think that's a good idea. But this here goes against our financial management policies.
So,
Funding with one-time money, funding people with one-time money. So I'm just wondering, how do I maintain a proper vote that doesn't violate my own policies?
Well, I think my response to that would be, you could modify the letter to just include the, you know, the carports. Or have the carport as the primary request, and then the monies, you know, for people as a secondary request. And it wouldn't exactly comply with the policy. It'd be kind of around the edges perhaps, but I think that, you know, your principles would be intact, so to speak, if you did it that way. You may not agree with that, but I think,
We're around the edges.
yeah, we're nibbling around the edges,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, the staffing piece of this is not technically a staff person. It was floating hours that could be shared among the entire staff as needed. And those hours were in the budget last year. They were cut this year, which is leaving us really in a challenging position. I explained it to advisory. You know, you have a senior center manager, Ryan, who's budgeted at fewer hours than the center is actually open all week. That's really, that's a lot for a department that's as busy as they are. So, I know what you're saying. we're obviously making it work without those floating hours this year, but and, you know, ideally, they would be much needed
Oh,
to share among the
and
staff.
I'm not doubting the need, I'm just concerned with the method. Just, for that, because, basically, if this was approved, you'd have a 1-year hiatus, and then you're potentially back to the same position the year after. That you lose all that. And I think we potentially need to find another way of doing that, so it's ongoing, rather than
I agree.
depending on an earmark.
I agree.
That's, that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Would the board be more comfortable with modifying the letter, requesting an earmark for the vehicle shelter only? And I get the concern of your following the financial management policy, and we have to think ahead. It's like when we buy a new vehicle and keep the old one, we add to the budget without funding sometimes. And you get the same thing when you add people. We have done this, used one-time money, like get a grant and then had a police officer for 3 years, and the grant goes out, and then and you end up right back where you are. So
I have a question. Is this, so this letter is being presented by them to add it? Would we have the ability to possibly add another item on this? If we're not gonna do the floating hours?
You have the authority to modify the letter as you said. as a board.
I'm just saying that, I'm just saying that we have a need in the town for some physical items. I mean, a small one that wouldn't be as crazy amount would be just looking at the agenda, looking at the, well, looking at, not the electric sign, but the digital type of signage, that TCTV was looking at, not the electric sign like, that Bob has for the streets, but the other form of signs. I know that there's supposed to be some money, but even just one would be helpful. And I think it was estimated at $50,000. Unless that's the other kind.
we do have, and I hate to let's see, our next meeting is the 24th. Don't want to put it off, but sometimes if you rush. If accepted the recommendation, but table making a decision until our next meeting with caveat of because I know the hours, but I just don't. I think the ask should be, if we're gonna act tonight, would be to modify and request an earmark for the vehicle shelter. And then look at the dollars long term, and the positions. Because if you get people or you get money for these hours and then you start doing it and then you have to find the money next year. It's just it's how it works. It's, would the board be good with that if we motion to have the TA to modify this letter to request a single earmark of the 40,000 for a vehicle shelter for vehicles for seeing something.
I'm fine with that.
Then the other part takes time to look at that and
If I may, Mr. Chair, there were estimates, for the shelters. Jackie had obtained those estimates prior to her initial presentation before advisory. I would suggest that you take those figures and then add a 10% contingency to that.
I do have updated estimates that I gave to capital last week, so I can get those to you.
Were they higher than?
They were higher. Not great with math, but I think the one that we would like is about $5,000 more than what the estimate was that we had.
No, it's your 10%. That's 10%.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
yes, Mr. Mayor.
Just a question, because I looked at this. I believe when I heard before about the shelter, it was gonna be a metal structure at one point. Is that correct?
You have it's the same
I,
as.
I know this here is stick built.
Yeah.
Apparently, so I was just wondering,
It's the exact same model with the sides, if we got an updated estimate from Frechette. So,
okay,
yeah,
so it's a stick built. Framed. Roofed. Okay. Yeah, because then I'd bump up that 10%. I think we probably want to go with an estimate of closer to 45. To have some leeway. If you had 37, it's gone, the one you want is 5 more. We're still short at 45 for overage. But, as Noel said, if you're gonna ask, might as well ask for what we need.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Phil.
To Mr. May's point, looking at the quotes in front of us, a 30 by 10 by 10 building with the raised front and the reduced slope to the rear. Average vehicle is 15 to 20 feet in length. Is 10 feet deep big enough? In my mind, I'm telling myself no, but I'm not an expert on this.
30 feet wide. 10 feet deep. Yeah, that's
That's a shallow carport.
not gonna cover a car.
Nope.
No. Yeah, no, you'd need something closer to 20 feet anyway.
Yep. Mark Bus, we're probably looking at 25, 28 feet easily.
Yeah. Yep.
I'd be happy to speak with Bob, he's the one who helped
Yep.
us get the.
I'm not trying to shoot a full of holes. It's just something that I saw that is glaring at me. I don't think the vehicle's gonna fit under it and give us the coverage we're looking for.
Okay, yep, we wanna get it right, so.
Yep.
I'll speak with Bob. He helped us to get the estimate and,
Of course, that always comes with an increased cost,
Hmm.
as we are aware.
Did you get estimates from other contractors too, or just Fichette?
yes, for sure.
May have to go out under 30B for the standard bid process as well. Yep. It's a great question.
We'll get that figured out before we make a decision.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to take this letter under advisement and bring it on our next meeting from 24. So the TA can get with Jackie and Bob and look at the size and the cost. And if we have to ask for more, it'll, increase the ask, we'll just bump up the ask. I don't think we'll even cut it.
Hmm.
I scribbled out a motion, bumping it to 50. Once you go past 50, you have to go to bid. Under 50, 10 to 50, you have to get 3 votes to follow 30B. So I'd make a motion to take this letter under advisement and table it until our next meeting.
Our next meeting is the 17th, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's the 24th of November.
We didn't do the 11/10, 11/17.
We did B.
Okay,
Our next meeting.
sure.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No.
On the motion, how would you vote, Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Graves,
Yes.
Mr. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Basso,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Jackie?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
Let's get this done.
And we will,
Appreciate it.
we'll get this.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is, a request for reconsideration of, vehicle transfer vote from previous meeting. Our meetings are guided according to operating procedures, in part by Robert's rules. And according to Robert's rules, a motion to reconsider a vote in a committee can be taken up regardless of the time that has elapsed since the vote was taken. There is no limit on the number of times a question can be reconsidered. The motion can be made by any member of the committee who did not vote with the losing side. The maker of the motion to reconsider can be one who voted with the prevailing side, or one who did not vote at all, or one was absent. And the vote was 3 yes and 2 no's. So according to Robert's rules, one of the persons who voted yes would have to make the motion to reconsider that vote.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Toth,
if you recall, following the meeting, the next morning, I did send you an email after reviewing our policy and reviewing what we had gone through. It was my belief we violated our policy because we took action on something the first time we heard it. So I had also sent you a request to reconsider this so we could discuss it. So I would like to enter a motion as one of the members who voted on the prevailing side to revisit the discussion, vote for the possible transfer of the police vehicle being decommissioned that had not yet been surplused.
second.
And I do have that in writing. We can hand this in to the clerk, the administrative assistant.
On the motion to reconsider the transfer of the vehicle, any discussion? Hearing none on the motion, how would you vote? Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Graves,
No.
Mr. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Basso, and I vote yes. So in considering to what to do with the police vehicle number 18. In our financial management policy, it talks about the designation and approval of surplus items having a real sale or salvage value, regardless of dollar amount. No tangible surplus items owned by the town of Templeton having a resale or salvage value shall be sold or otherwise disposed of except upon the authorization of the town administrator. The written recommendation shall include a specific description of the item to be disposed of, including relevant make, model, number, serial number, vehicle ID, number, et cetera. The written recommendation is also to include justification reason for the request. The town administrator shall review the written recommendation from the respective department head and make a final determination of its merits. A list of approved items shall be submitted to the select board for final authorization. Upon the select board's approval, the department head, his or her designee, shall work with the town administrator to coordinate the sale or disposal. Then there is a disposal or surplus of items having a resale or salvage value estimated at 10,000 or more. And then there is disposal or surplus of items having a resale or salvage value estimated at less than $10,000. I had emailed the chief of police, and he says, Cruiser 18 has already been decommissioned and is at the highway garage awaiting to be assigned to a new department or auctioned off at the next town auction. So I believe what the vote did was jump the step. First, the vehicle needs to, the department head tells the town administrator it can go. Then we have to surplus it. Then then the board has to vote whether you transfer it over here or if we set it aside for an auction. Sometimes they're buying a new vehicle, sometimes it is the vote is to, buying a new one is to use that as a trade to help reduce the cost. But this is a cruiser that has been decommissioned and it's sitting at the highway barn. So it would be up to the board what to do with this vehicle, keeping in mind that buying new cruisers on a regular basis lowers the maintenance budget for the police department. But when you buy a new vehicle and keep the old vehicle, that's increasing the budget of the highway bond because they're the ones that are going to do all the maintenance on it. That's the department that the fuel account comes out of. Then there is also registering, insuring, an inspection sticker on these vehicles. So when you buy a new one and you keep an old one, now you have two vehicles you have to take care of instead of just one.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I also like to say that if you have one that's a really, really, really old one versus one that's maybe only 5 years old that you're getting rid of, sometimes it's better to get rid of the really, really, really old one and replace it with something if you don't have the money to pay for a brand new one. Unfortunately, that happens. Not everybody or any entity like town to buy brand new ones all the time. And keeping one that's really, really old versus one that's 5 years old is worse in maintenance costs.
So now that we're at the point of reconsidering the previous vote, it would come down to what the board wants to do with regarding the vehicle.
Mr. Chair,
It's my
I would make a motion that we set this vehicle for the next town auction.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm asking the question. The agenda item says it's a recommendation of vehicle transfer, it's a reconsider a vehicle's transfer. But is that the same thing as doing a surplus vote right now? Because it's not put on as to do a surplus vote. Do we have to have that listed in the agenda, Robert's rules?
we're reconsidering the vote to transfer the vehicle. So,
But the original vote wasn't about a surplus because we hadn't gotten the surplus item. I just didn't know.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. May,
I'm more than willing to put my recommendation that we put this on a future agenda to set this for surplus and auction. Not jumping the gun. Yeah, sure.
that would be
24th.
two things.
Mr. Chair, if I might also, would this item not have to go before capital also?
If we
If it was to be
transfer,
transferred or even request for transfer, we should have it before capital.
if it's valued more than 10,
Which it definitely is. Mm-hmm. Two 2018. Ford Explorer, PBV.
okay, so the earmark letter and the surplus will be on the next meeting. Next item, item F, electronic signs request by member Ms. Graves.
So, I had just been thinking about how the budget process works for the different departments. And, like if we were to do any kind of signage or anything like that, would that be something that our department, like meaning select board budget, would have to do it? But at the same time, I was thinking too, like electronical sign versus the digital sign, that we're always like bringing in the sign up on the front lawn, the electric sign. And I always worry, like, when we bring it up here, that it can't stay here that long for whatever the subject matter is, because it has to go to a traffic situation. And I just, I worry that we don't have an adequate sign system in the town, being it digital, with the situation with, the EDC, EDIC funds, if we could have it. And I looked in, like, that's like been ongoing for a couple of years on that, and TCTV wants to do it. And I just don't want us to lose any opportunities, any grants. And now that listening to them about the earmarks, I was like, well, maybe that could be a possibility. But like, I don't know, like, now I'm listening to earmarks, I don't even know if that's something that TCTV can do. Again, it's just a matter of just having our budget and having these signs being dragged around, the electric ones, versus having a digital sign in the front of the building. Was pretty much what I just wanted to talk about. Like, we just kick the can on sign, getting a nice sign, and we're just dragging our electric signs around town on the trucks and stuff, and cost money. So I just wanted to just point out that maybe we could start trying to figure it out, if it's something that if our budget has to do something too, or another department besides TCTV, it just seems that we're not getting anywhere with, with the electric sign being used for something that if we had the digital signs or a sign in the town could help with that situation.
Okay, so if everybody's familiar with the digital sign in front of the school,
Yes.
they're not Narragansett. I reached out to them and asked about what was the cost. The sign was $38,970 in fiscal 21-22. It was by Lyman Signs. That price did not include the electrical work that was donated. There is a monthly electric charge of about $50 a month. They have a separate meter. That sign was paid for by funded with graduation class donation in Athol Savings Bank. There is a quote that it went through, and that went through Lyman Signs. There's a breakdown of what the various things cost. I believe the masonry work was also done with above outside of the cost of the actual sign. So the electronic signs, I reached out to the Mr. Solzik and asked what those signs cost. And we bought 3 of them. They were $17,550 a piece for a total of $52,650. I reached out to the company and asked if they would give me an estimate. They were kind enough to, so one of those portable signs was is now $20,695. It's the same setup as the ones we have. If you buy more than one, you can possibly get they could possibly drop the price down. He also, I did ask Road Safe if they did permanent stationary signs like the one over at the school, and he said they did, and he could give a quote. I believe when TCTV went to Lyman Sign, it was in the neighborhood of $50,000. I believe that included all of the work. Would be the electrical and so forth, depending on how you design it and set it up. So there would be the cost of getting the signs, and then also just remember the electric bill is there as well. And I would have to ask the school if I know I've seen someone out there working one time on it, but I don't know if they've had, any issues with it in a few years that they've had it. I mean, it works every day and stuff. I'm not aware of how many towns have these. I was searching through towns on my town government. There was one town that had it on their agenda, but I went to the meeting and they must have skipped over something because it wasn't in the minutes. It wasn't talked about. But that's just what I looked into to see what the cost would be. And just to have an idea, the board would have an idea of selectmen's budget, what it would potentially be.
Mr. Chair, if I may. I did a little bit of looking also on this, and without a lot of specificity, I looked at, 3x5 and 5x7 signs. And yes, you have the initial upfront cost, you have the maintenance, you have the electricity, but you also have software issues, you have, and we're talking about putting, information on there, advertisements on there and such. That all takes somebody creating that. And from what I read, the go-to software or the expected life expectancy for most of the digital signs used every day outside, and it's dependent upon the weather conditions and placement and all this stuff and the heat and but the general rule that I found was 5 to 7 years. With 10 being the outside if it's only used 12 hours a day rather than 24/7. It seems to be rather costly to me. But that's just me. I see as a digital sign as a complete expense myself. I don't see it as a revenue increaser. I don't see it as anything like that. Not in this town with this traffic and at that size. I couldn't find anything anywhere that justified that. In the life expectancy. So, that's just my 2 cents.
Anyone else? Anything? All right. Next item is item G, grant writer and part-time administrative assistant, Ms. Graves.
Yeah, so we had the money in our budget for a grant writer or an assistant, but now we've hired some people in our office. And grant writing keeps on coming up over the last several weeks or so in different places where I've been. And we definitely need, there was this thing that I think that Jeff had seen as well as me, and maybe others, that Gardner did a company that they did on a basis of grants, and they're going that route. I tried to find stuff on the company that they used. All I could come up with that they were some kind of lobbyist type of thing in Washington. So I don't know if there's another company with the same name that I just wasn't coming up with. Oh, okay. Well, that's what I came up with. So I didn't know if that would be probably something. I mean, I don't see that for our town, but I do know that I ran the numbers of what we had left in our account. I talked to the town accountant. We have 1,100, I wrote it down so I could say it right. We had, did I write it? We had $199,000 left for the remainder of the year. So doing the math on our employees currently in the offices, we would probably, to stay on the safe bet, we're probably looking at enough to either hire the grant writer at the same rate as that we had the one before that was in the book, or an assistant for our administrative assistant in our office that could help out with the minutes, which is a little bit, it's half the cost. And if any of our staff in our office had to go somewhere, we could still have coverage. Right now, it's tight coverage. We had the 3 in the office, but we really do need to get back into the grant writing world again, because we're losing money every day we don't find a grant, do a grant. So, but I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention on the board, that we would still have at least about $60,000 in my estimate between now and the end of the year. So we have a possibility of being able to, and the reason why I would say we had the grant writer at $48,784 in our budgeted to go over that would probably not be recommended, because based on our current staff in the office, And what our budget forecast for 2027 would be, we would be a shortfall. So, on a conservative level, it's either the grant writer for our office or possibly at 18,000 something, an assistant based on our numbers. So I just wanted our select board to be aware of it, that we do have two issues going on. One, we don't have anybody to, I mean, granted, the staff probably could help with grants, but they're trying to play catch up in our office on stuff. So how long will that take when they can? Because we have contracts and things. You know, and every day we don't go after a grant is money our town doesn't have. But it would be nice to have someone to pay the coverage if they have to go to meetings or things to have the office open. So you're kind of like in a rock and a hard place. But I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention on where we stand in our office financially. And, you know, if anybody has any idea.
So the firm that Gardner is moving to, is called Keller Partners. They're trying to get them in a 5-year contract, according to the article. They offer a flat monthly fee for unlimited grant writing services. And they also, have the potential to include lobbying efforts within the contract. And that's one of the things that the firm does is, they lobby, and that is how you get things done in the state legislature and other places. It's, you pay and you get. If you don't pay, you don't get. Just an example, the big, what they would do about all the service plazas on the turnpike, it was awarded to one company. In Ireland, a local company, they had a headhunter lobbying firm, and I don't know how much they spent, but they got that back to the table and turned around, and they ended up getting the contract. It was for a lower amount than what was originally put out there. And when it was all said and done, the lobbying firm was, thanks for the money, and they say, but that's the advantage that I watched, part of the mayor's, they was talking about this, was they not only do the grant writing service for flat fees, but they do lobbying, so they know how to go down there, who to talk to, how to talk to them, and that's how it works that way. Yeah, it's just, I know there's, other vendors got together and I don't know, they got what they wanted, so. Just, I thought it was an interesting thing, then, it's moving away from the Central Mass. So like MRPC, but it's a different entity, and they're trying to go with Keller for the twofold, the flat fee, go after as many grants as you can, and they lobby, so. To me, that'd be worth looking into. I don't think we're gonna get an in-house grant writer for the small amount that we just, somebody that can go shopping for the grants and get them. I can go work in Templeton and make 50, but I got somebody over here that's offering me 100. I mean, I know where I'm going. You know, that's if I was doing that, so that was, like I said, I thought that was,
Mr. Chair, how much would a service like that cost roughly, you know?
they do mention, an initial investment of 75,000, and they secured nearly 20 million in grants for the city. But I think the way it's worded, that's the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. And Keller Partners to manage grant applications. So it seems like they're moving to go to Keller. Mainly for the flat fee and for the lobbying
Mm.
part that's there, which is especially if you're looking for state money. And yes, Gardner has Representative Zlotnick, he lives in the city of Gardner, so he works for his district, but I just have to believe he works for his town. I mean, I don't blame him. So you get elected and reelected. But I wanted to reach out to the mayor's office and get some details, but when I came across this article, he'd just been reelected, so I know it's blah, blah, blah. But I do plan on,
What's
let's
the
go
name of that
follow
one?
up with that.
What's the name of it?
Yeah, you can have it. Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
It's done.
Just general comment. Well, I do understand the spirit and intent of why this was brought up. I would just caution on a grant writer. We have asked multiple department heads multiple times how many grants they have sought, and it's always come back none. I'm going to give a comparison. The town of Orange has a grant writer. The town of Orange fire chief does not use the town's grant writer. He has been rather successful, has replaced apparatus, has increased his staffing, has worked on upgrading a building. And it's just a shining example of how a department head can take something and run with it. We've missed out on a number of safer grants to up our staffing. We've missed out on the grants for the fire apparatus that run 2 years behind right now. The FY24 numbers were the ones just released. That is a standard practice. But we look all around us, Gardner, Westminster, Fitchburg, they all got new fire trucks. Why didn't we? And I can tell you the answer. We never asked. And I'm not going to put that on our former grant writer because I don't believe she knew. So it's a giant double-edged sword, but where do we go? But I'm sure every department knows their peculiarities, knows their specifics. And in my mind, that's part of a department head's charge. Be looking for these and be proactive and start digging for them. And yes, I understand some of these, there are personnel costs over a 3 to 5 year period. It's a waxing and waning amount and you've got to be able to absorb. But again, you got to start somewhere.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Anything else, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Just as a information on this here, is my belief that the last grant writer that we did hire, we hired right out of college, no experience, and we got it for 48. Everything that I'm seeing out there for an entry-level grant writer, the range is 58 to 62. And for a senior grant writer, it's 98 to 108. So there's a large range there. And, the thing that concerns me is right now going for a grant writer when I see grants kind of drying up right at the moment. I don't know if we're chasing something that, is not, but I do like the idea of hiring a service. I think you get a more, let's say, top-notched response for similar money to a potentially a entry level, somewhere in the middle anyway. Because just as a reference to that Keller, I read up on them and did some research on who they are and what they do, and they do seem to be very effective with their grant writing and lobbying. It gives them kind of an edge up on the individual grant writer. So just as some input to think about when going to fund, because we really, like you said, about 60,000 in our account, we could barely, and I wouldn't even, I wouldn't want to do it, but hire an entry level.
Yeah.
So that's all for me.
With this, Mr. Chair, with this type of service, like Gardner was doing, would that be helpful, like, for like the bridge issues that we have?
They go after
It'd be
it.
All
helpful for
that.
anybody.
Yeah, the lobbyists and stuff, this, yeah,
Anything that there's a grant available.
But the lobbying part would come into,
but it'd be helpful.
Do the-
Yeah,
do the
that'd
rest.
probably be the helpful part, yeah.
all right, the next item on the agenda, H, police officers for fiscal 27. After, the quarterly reports from the chief and remembering, the talk of, budget meeting back in March of 2024, the same subject came up, talking about the cost of an officer and overtime and sick time, vacation stuff that runs no. Just vacations and backfill positions is 137 and sick leave is 61. The overtime cost and at that meeting that when this were talking about hiring new officers, part of the conversation was and in going through this, there was somebody said that bad word, save money, but you're not saving money. You just, instead of spending it on some overtime, it would go towards the salary of an additional employee. So your overtime would go down. So if you're looking for 300,000 instead, and you got 50 from overtime that you can pay, instead of looking for 300, you'd only be looking for 250. So I emailed the chief and I asked them, what would 2 officers account for in the budget? And what would that allow to happen? And what would 4 officers account for the budget? And what would that allow? And also, thinking down the road, the 2 sergeants, for potentially just asking, if they have, what the time left is, if he was to do like the previous chief did for Chief Bennett, who was a sergeant, and he was recommended for the chief. So, 1 officer would be estimated cost of approximately 122,906. At the 24 meeting, 1 officer was estimated to cost about 100,000. So, and 2 additional officers for a total of 3 would be an estimated cost of 368,718. So, 370 or so. The officers would allow the department to go to 3 officers for a day shift and 3 to 11 shift. 1 officer would be primarily call taker and traffic enforcement per shift, freeing up other officers that have other duties and responsibilities. I also asked him the effect on the cruisers, and he said we have enough cruisers to make the scheduling work. Just figure out the assignment of vehicles. If the chief indicated that if he would retire when he's eligible in 2027, Sergeant Hall would be eligible to retire within 2 years of that date. Sergeant Fliss would have approximately 7 years after 2027 to serve until he would be eligible for retire, if that's the way we decided to go. And we heard the portion about the tax rate and so forth. So I emailed the assessors, and we're not talking about having an override. We're not thinking about asking for an override. I just asked in terms of, what a dollar on the tax rate raises. So if you did an override of $500,000 to the tax levy, would increase the tax rate about 43 cents, and this is based off of previous year, this year's tax rate. What the new one will be, we don't know. We'll find out probably in a month or so. And increase the single-family home tax bill by about $157.43 for the year. $1 million added to the tax levy would have increased the tax rate about 86 cents and increase a single-family home tax bill by about $314.85. I asked that question anticipating what the cost would be for 3 officers. I just wanted to be able to know, okay, if you do that, and if that was the way that you went to try to pay for them, what you would have to ask for and what would be the ramifications on tax bills. I didn't want to put out information, on half of it, and so what would that cost the taxpayers, and go, well, I don't know. But again, we are not talking about asking for an override, presenting an override. I just wanted the information. So if we, if you add 3 officers, that was the cost, and the math would have to be done on, as far as taking the override, the overtime and sick time and all of that backfill, how much of that could you reduce and put it towards the salaries for the 3 officers, and, and remembering the CBAs, and because, you have 3 more officers, you have to go to the range, you either shoot fewer rounds or you buy more rounds. They have to do the same thing with the taser stuff, with the cartridges and all of that. So, but he that was his best estimate, without knowing the, the unknown is the CBA that's still being worked on. But I believe he used the best numbers the current numbers that he had. So just for information, since it was brought up at his quarterly, and it's a couple years in a row when he's talked about, the number of officers they have. So general information to the board and residents. Hire 3 more, 1 more, that's what the cost. And if you went to ask for, an increase in the levy limit, that would be the effect on your bill. Now, it's 500,000 is about 43 cents, so, half of that would be a quarter, thereabouts. Like as I said, I just did that as a follow-up to the presentation of the chief, because he's been, and you say, hey, if I need more officers and what this happens, and that would also be the dropping the part-timers, so whatever, the cost of those are, plus reducing the amount of overtime and sick time and stuff back. You're always gonna have that, but you could take a chunk of that and the part-timers and whatever that would work out to be for the total budget, and then see what your additional funds you would need, and just have the information to if it comes up in the budget season, it's never too early to.
The loss of the part-timers is another unfunded mandate, because the post commission is eliminating part-time officers. We don't have much of a choice.
Yeah, you have to they gotta go get the training and all that stuff, and if I'm gonna pay you to be full-time training, you be full-time, and they just. Another one of them state things that.
Yes.
Help us out. The next item is item I, and there's a memo from the town administrator And we recently voted on this policy. And I went back and looked, and the matrix requirement was in the original email from Ryan Holmquist about the things that we had to do, and voting on the policy, along with creating this matrix, was part of it. But what came from our office to be on the agenda did not have that matrix in the back of it. And this is, again, to stay in compliance with the Cannabis Control Commission, who changes and adjusts the rules and stuff almost as quick and as much as the ARPA stuff was changing. So it's a simple thing to just accept the social equity policy matrix as presented, and according to our operating procedures, a document assigned for the clerk to sign. So I would make a motion to accept the social equity matrix as presented and for the clerk to sign. Any discussion on the motion and questions on the memo, or what it's going to do? It's basically like, it's in the back there, like a scrolling thing. It's,
No.
we do this and we put it on the website, and we'll make the Cannabis Control Commission happy. You know, we just had to vote on something. Poor guy, he's been back here, I don't know how many times, because they keep telling him, oh, but you gotta do this, and they add this and do that, and
Stuck it out and jumped through every hoop.
you know, it's something that started out, you know, with pretty clear, cut and dry, and, you know, start a business, do this and this, but then Mr. Mayor, there's a motion and a second to accept the social equity matrix
Mhm.
as presented and for the clerk to sign for our policy. Do you have any?
I'm good. Thank you.
So any discussion on that motion?
No.
Hearing none on the motion, how would you vote? Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Graves,
I abstain.
Mr. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Basso,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Item J is a memo from, again, from the town administrator. And we've discussed the town credit card multiple times, and at our last, previous meeting in early October, one of his first meetings, he discovered that for the town credit card, they had to give up his personal information with his name on it, and he didn't really want to do that, and he was hesitant to do it, and I don't blame him. He's been, and it turns out we have a couple of things that can't seem to get around doing without a credit card. So there was a credit card indemnification agreement that he asked. And he ran through town council. Basically says that he will control the card. And he will provide the, you know, personal information, and basically it covers him, like his name, his credit. And this will just, this to cover him as much as possible. For liability and his, personal, his name is on there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
without getting a card, we would lose our email accounts and we would lose our phones. Because those companies only do cards these days. Few other entities that, just for folks at home to know. And this would, I hope, would give the ability, if the senior center had any kind of thing that comes up, that they can only take a card to book like a trip to a museum or something. I know everybody's working very hard in the town to try to get purchase orders. I was a little disappointed because I thought we were looking into a P card, which would have been a little bit more easier for some of the department like the senior center for use. But right now we're in the crunch because we are about to lose all of our email accounts with the Microsoft and all that. And our phones, so we need the card. And I don't think that, I mean, I understand, I don't think having, based on what I know about business cards, the liability isn't on, the liability, it says Town of Templeton on the card, it says his name, the card is the Town of Templeton, under the Town of Templeton, because of the way bank standards are, they ask you for your life to fill out, and he feels more comfortable in order having this, agreement, even though I don't feel like his name being on it is a big factor because it's the Town of Templeton's card. With that said, I'd like to make a motion to accept the agreement and authorize Mr. Ryan to be able to get the card.
and for
Is there more to, I need more?
the board to sign.
And for the board to sign. For the board to sign the agreement.
Ms. Basso. Motion is seconded. Any further discussion?
I just have one comment to add.
Mr. Dove?
I understand the reluctance on the part of our town administrator. I fully support it. I would not want to disclose my social security number either. In today's day and age, any business that will not accept and bill you, I have to question their validity. We have a Dun and Bradstreet number. We have an electronic identification number for the town. I don't personally believe this needs to go to an individual's social security number, and I will go on record stating that.
Thank you. Anything further? Hearing nothing on the motion, how would you vote? Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Basso?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Last item is item K regarding TCTV supplemental funding. Mr. Castle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board. So as you may know, the town accountant sent out an email last week stating that the validity of our request for Article 8 for supplemental funding for the cable TV department is invalid or would be invalid because the state has not certified free cash or retained earnings, and we cannot. According to her email from her check with the Department of Revenue, apparently, we cannot vote to transfer money from our retained earnings, which is actually my department's money. So I'm looking for alternatives. and
So-
ideas, thoughts.
I emailed Amber about that. She checked with the DOR. And the DOR has responded that if you put contingent upon DOR certification of retained earnings, if not certified, the vote is invalid. So I have, I ran this, supposed with Mr. Ryan, and a potential motion could read, I move to appropriate the sum of $22,000 and no cents to the cable department for a supplemental appropriation to its fiscal year 2026 operating budget to total in the aggregate the sum of $200,650 and no cents, and to meet said appropriation by a transfer of said sum from retained earnings of the cable fund contingent upon the DOR certification of retained earnings. If not certified, the vote is invalid. So we can follow through with the vote. And the free cash is in the retained earnings, will be certified at some point. And right now, when I talked with the accountant, she gets ready to close out 25 so she can submit the free cash certification and other things, and she finds an error. So she's working on that, and at the same time, staying current with fiscal 26, because you don't want to get behind and do things. So that is the message from the DOR. And so that can go, the article can go, you just can't transfer the money until, could be next week, could be December. But as soon as it's certified and there's enough there, then it's available. It will be transferred.
That's fine with me, and thank you for looking
Okay.
into that. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, who will be making the amendment to the motion on the floor? Who should?
Again, this is just, like I said, I wrote this up and, I gave it to Mr. Ryan, and he's gonna check, he's gonna work on, the ones that we have to do. We only have 8 articles. Number 7 is already covered, so board won't have to do that, so we just have 7 articles to make a motion on.
Would we do, would we do, the motion on the floor? Would that be something that Steve would do as a
Okay.
resident?
Generally, it's been the practice of the board and we need to, write up the motion and have 2 of them, and whoever's gonna read it signs it and gives it to the moderator. It can become part of the record over there. But it's been divided up, but I mean, we only have 7, so. But generally, the annual town meeting, the motion's written up and each board member gets 3, 4, 5, how many articles you have divided up. And when you get to the article, you read the motion and somebody seconds it, and then it belongs to town meeting. Anybody can make the motion, I mean. Mr. May.
Mr. Chair, one question. Since these are retained earnings, and they have not been certified yet, should we not put something on the term of up to 22,000 in case it comes in less?
Again, the DOR it's in there, either if it's this or it doesn't meet the amount, that's why that's not the motion that's gonna be, but gives you an idea of what it would say, it's contingent
Okay.
upon the certification. If it's not enough, it says only 22, then, I mean, 20,000, whatever, then it's invalid. They're lucky they're letting us do this.
Yeah.
Because technically, when July 1 got here, if you don't use it, You don't have. It'll be there, in the next certification. So whatever, if there was, retained earnings from the previous year, plus, it comes around, but if you don't use it by June 30th, you lose access to it until it's certified again. It's, I'll make the rules.
Me.
It's like I
asking
said,
a
I
question.
didn't, I was surprised the DOR did that.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping when this article come up and put it on the warrant, I was hoping, I know this was back in August, I was hoping. And if the certification came in, well, Wednesday, then you wouldn't need the contingent order because it would be available, but.
Mr. Chair, I was worried about it from the get-go, because the cash wasn't certified in line with all the work she had to do. I just didn't know if she could make it.
So the DOR has said, if you put that wording in there, then it can go and the vote can go. And when it gets certified, then that money is available. Brings me my concern though, that we're July, August, September, October, 4.5 months into the budget and we need to put more money in the budget.
Can answer that.
That puzzles me and when, when I looked at the monthly spending out of like personnel and stuff, it worries me.
We're on track right now, and we've been able to save a little bit of money. However, I'm not concerned about now. I'm concerned about April, May, June. And that's where we're gonna need the 22,000. And even with the 70,000 digital equity grant, we're probably not gonna see all of that reimbursed. Because, we budget for some of the hardware that we have to buy. And you budget conservatively, and it's probably gonna cost less than what we budgeted for. And that means we're gonna get less back. And we're 53,000 short in personnel going into this year. And that digital equity grant can make up 43,000, I believe, in labor. However, it stretches over 2 fiscal years to the end of September. So we have a whole quarter of FY26. And because we've gotten a late start on it right now, I'm just planning stuff to do events that we specified we would do in that grant at the senior center in January. We need to file a 6-month report with Mass Tech and MBI and an invoice for reimbursement at the 6-month March. So that's March, will be reimbursed in April. We could already be running negative balances by then. So that's why the 22,000 would enable us to at least have that. And we're not going to use up all the grant money then. We're going to have another reimbursement in September. And I don't think we're going to be halfway through that grant by then because of the late start we got. So we've got multiple complications going on.
Again, and it'll be, it's always up to town meeting, but it can go in front of town meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll be glad to come back too and talk to you about digital signage and give you a plan, which I think you will see the advantage of doing it. And we're happy to do that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Steve.
We have reached the end of the agenda. There is no executive session for this evening. We are at board member comments. May,
I'm good.
Ms. Graves?
I just want to remind everybody that the food drive is this weekend at the senior center, behind the senior center. And also the town meeting is on Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. And we hope that folks come out to the town meeting to exercise their rights to vote.
Mr. Toth?
Couple quick things. First off, happy birthday to the Marines, 250 years strong. I know that's near and dear to Mr. Bennett's heart. Doing a little bit of research in the past week, I found an interesting little tidbit, and it's questionable what organization actually funded it, but they are rebuilding the Tons Tavern, the birthplace of the Marine Corps in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's about 250 feet, slightly off kilter to where it originally sat. The question was it the Marine Corps League? Was it some other Marine Corps association, or was it a historical society? But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. They're rebuilding a historical building that hopefully will get put on a register and a docket. So that was kind of cool and interesting, kind of the feel-good story with all the other negative connotations running across the national news in the last month or so. Ubiquitous shout out, anybody interested, tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock in Baldwinville Common, the Legion will be doing the Veterans Day remembrance. It'll be a very short ceremony, and as in the past, everybody's welcome to attend. There's usually some kind of a short, quick reception afterwards. It's going to occur, rain or shine. Everybody's welcome to be there. And the final shot that I want to make, I by no means meant to diss any of our department heads. I know everybody's working very diligently. We have a very challenging budget year ahead of us. Please bear with us. We are trying to do our best. We are trying to recover from a bunch of hiccups and challenges and the ARPAs and the additional spendings that kind of drove us into this scenario, and we can slowly work our way out of it. It is going to unfortunately take time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Bessel?
Mr. Toth pretty much said what I was gonna say. Happy 250th to the Marines.
Thank you.
Yep.
All the Marines everywhere
Mhm.
are having a good time right now.
Yes, they are.
One thing I would like to make note of, last Friday, over at the high school, there was the annual, meeting with the 5th grade class for their Veterans Day project. Unfortunately for me, something came up of emergency nature and I could not make it, and that really bugs me because I miss the kids. On the good side, I heard Mr. Toth was there, that not only was Miss Damon there this year, apparently she plans to come back next year. And Mr. Toth, if you would, how did that, I know the kids must have had to have done what they usually do.
It went rather well, as in years past. The 5th grade class was absolutely amazing. The work they did, memorizing poems, memorizing songs, their presentations. They had 5 different groups that did the presentations. Miss Damon was kind of jokingly, one of her requirements was the teacher who took it over had to continue the program the way she started it. We were trying to figure out, was it 31 or 33 years? It's over 3 decades. And it is one of the wonderful things that helped the Narragansett community earn their Purple Star recognition. That was more toward the high school. But when we look at everything that goes on, the high school part of it, the middle school part of it, Memorial Day with what the Templeton Center Elementary does. And it's just, the support is phenomenal all across the town. There was only a small handful of veterans. A number of folks had some other issues and challenges and conflicting appointments, but for everybody who was there, it was quite informative. Again, the tear jerking moments and
it's a really awesome thing, and it's informal. It's not what I call dog and pony show. It's just, you go meet the kids and the teacher, and they do some really, really nice stuff. They poems and this and that. Did they have the box of their trick or treat candy?
They had the box of goodies, that was their
Talking to them for
sacrifice.
giving up their sweets like that,
Yeah,
but
and they also had a bunch of cards that were presented. Those went to the Legion and they're being forwarded on through the VA channels. So those will reach out to some of the other vets. One of the vets from the DAV did make it a point that some of the veterans who were in the facilities, the Holyoke Soldiers Home, the VA hospital up in Bedford, the VA hospital in Jamaica Plain, that some of those veterans are never coming home. And they don't necessarily have families come in, but to sit there and hand somebody a card and you watch, just like you've done,
yeah,
you watch these big bad guys and they just kind of sit there and crumble and fall apart. It's quite the moving experience. And I don't think the children actually understand and realize what they did.
yeah. And but that's, to me, that's the biggest thing and privilege about it is actually meeting them. They're fifth graders.
Yep.
They're little kids and they come up with stuff that is just, it's a really nice thing. I'm sad I missed it, but, I will see them next year. And on that note, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded during the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.